Welcome back to ABC General Hospital Spoilers, where today we dive into the explosive twists surrounding Josslyn's covert activities, Brennan's desperate measures, and the high-stakes fallout that throws Port Charles into chaos. Beneath the surface of summer tranquility, a dark undercurrent of deception has begun to unravel, threatening not only personal loyalties but the very core of law enforcement in the city. What began as a secretive mission soon escalates into a citywide crisis, and the consequences will echo through every corridor of General Hospital. It all began with Josslyn's quiet departure from Port Charles under the guise of taking a break from her stressful academic life. Carly, always protective of her daughter, believed the trip to be harmless. But beneath the surface, a more dangerous truth simmered. Josslyn wasn't simply on vacation. She had been recruited into a covert operation by Brennan, whose true identity and motivations remained murky. Brennan had slowly embedded himself into the lives of several citizens of Port Charles, and his influence extended farther than anyone suspected. Josslyn's involvement had to remain hidden at all costs, especially from Carly, who would never allow her daughter to engage in such dangerous work. However, secrets in Port Charles have a way of surfacing. Brennan, who had meticulously constructed his facade, began to fear that the delicate web he wove was about to collapse. Whispers of Josslyn's activities reached corners of the city he hadn't accounted for. Though she had carried out her part flawlessly, the simple act of her disappearance from Carly's radar became a liability. Brennan knew that if Carly learned even a sliver of the truth, the consequences could be catastrophic, not just for him, but for the entire clandestine operation. Faced with the risk of exposure, Brennan made a brutal decision. To divert attention and buy time, he targeted one of the city's most prominent figures, Anna, the police commissioner. Anna had long been a symbol of justice and truth in Port Charles, and she had started growing suspicious of Brennan's increasingly erratic behavior. Her intuitive mind had begun to piece together the inconsistencies in his past and his sudden closeness with people like Josslyn. Brennan, backed into a corner, saw only one solution. Anna had to disappear. Her abduction was swift, silent, and chillingly efficient. She vanished without a trace, triggering widespread panic within the police department and across the city. The commanding force behind law and order had been silenced, and the ripple effect was immediate. Officers scrambled, launching an exhaustive search while trying to keep the public unaware of the growing instability. The vacuum of leadership sparked internal conflict within the department. Officers who once relied on Anna's guidance found themselves clashing over how best to conduct the search and who to trust. Meanwhile, Carly remained unaware of the storm building around her. Her maternal instincts told her something was wrong with Josslyn's sudden withdrawal, but Brennan expertly played his part. When she questioned him about Josslyn's whereabouts, he responded with feigned concern and carefully constructed ignorance. To Carly, Brennan was nothing more than a man confused and frightened by the rumors. His performance was so convincing that Carly began defending him when others grew suspicious. As days passed without word from Anna, tensions boiled over in the city. Jordan, Mac, and Chase began pursuing their own separate leads, each convinced they were the only ones close to the truth. But each path they followed only led them deeper into a fog of disinformation carefully crafted by Brennan. The more they searched, the more fragmented their trust became, which was exactly what Brennan wanted. Division meant weakness, and weakness ensured his survival. However, what Brennan didn't anticipate was the resilience of Anna herself. Despite the sedatives and isolation, Anna's mind remained sharp. She began to gather details from her captors' movements, their careless whispers, and even the quality of the light seeping into her room. She calculated every second, storing observations and preparing for an opportunity. While Brennan believed her neutralized, Anna was building a strategy from within her cell. She would not remain a pawn in someone else's game for long. Back in Port Charles, Josslyn herself began to feel the weight of her decisions. Although she had accepted the mission with patriotic resolve, she had not anticipated the collateral damage. The realization that her actions may have indirectly led to Anna's kidnapping struck a nerve. For the first time, she began questioning Brennan's true motives. What had initially been framed as a noble cause was beginning to look like manipulation. Her trust in Brennan wavered, and she started planning her exit from the operation, but Brennan had eyes everywhere. She knew that if she made one false move, he could turn on her next. As Josslyn sought a path back to safety, she covertly reached out to Dex, someone she believed she could trust. She left a trail of subtle messages, phrases only Dex would understand, hoping that he would recognize the danger she was in and come for her without tipping off Brennan's network. Meanwhile, Carly continued digging into her daughter's travel records, contacting anyone who may have seen or heard from Josslyn. Slowly but surely, she began uncovering gaps in Brennan's story, inconsistencies in his timelines, and financial transactions that didn't add up. She felt the walls of truth closing in, but had no idea just how close she was to exposing a conspiracy that could endanger everyone she loved. When a burnt piece of clothing was found near an abandoned warehouse on the edge of the city, Chase and Mac rushed to investigate. Inside, they discovered fragments of security equipment and surveillance logs bearing Anna's name, proof that she had been taken and watched. The discovery reignited the search effort, and the department began to rally around a new theory: someone from within was orchestrating the chaos. Brennan, despite his polished exterior and charm, was now a person of interest. As Anna prepared to make her move, she used a moment of guard distraction to escape her confines, fighting through the pain of her captivity. Injured but determined, she slipped through a weak security point and fled into the woods, sending a weak emergency signal from a stolen radio transmitter. The signal was picked up by Jason, who had been monitoring covert frequencies after being tipped off by Dex. With time running out, Jason and Dex moved quickly, hoping to find Anna before Brennan's men did. The climax unfolded as Brennan realized Anna had escaped and sent a final order: silence her permanently. But by then, the tides had already turned. Jason and Dex intercepted Brennan's men before they could reach Anna. A violent confrontation erupted, resulting in several arrests and the retrieval of evidence linking Brennan to multiple crimes, including the manipulation of Josslyn and the kidnapping of a city official. Anna, bruised and battered, was finally rescued and returned to General Hospital, where Elizabeth and Portia worked tirelessly to stabilize her condition. Carly, having finally pieced together the truth, confronted Brennan at the station before he was taken away. The betrayal hit her deeply. Not only had he endangered her daughter, but he had also tried to dismantle the very foundation of the city. In a bitter twist, Brennan claimed he had done it all to protect Josslyn from greater threats, but his lies no longer held weight. Port Charles slowly began to rebuild in the aftermath. Anna, though deeply scarred by the ordeal, returned to her position with renewed strength. Carly stood by Josslyn as she faced the consequences of her choices. Trust had been broken, but lessons had been learned. Josslyn, who once believed she could navigate the shadows, now understood the price of silence and the danger of misplaced loyalty. And as Brennan sat behind bars, awaiting trial, whispers of others involved in his network began to circulate. The story may have reached its climax, but the war for truth in Port Charles was far from over. Because in this city, nothing stays buried forever.